How do I maintain my clinical mojo even when patients don't get the best results? It's mostly self-limiting belief states. I'm busy, people come back, I receive positive feedback, and I see people get better. When I get stuck though, that overshadows everything and I can get lost in paralysis to make next best steps and then often do not enough, which doesn't seem fair. Okay, so this has to do with when patients don't get the best results from your treatments, right? Because, it can be a mixed bag. It's medicine, right? There's a lot of variability. So this is, for one, the big thing to do is go through clinical clarity. I've got a whole section of trainings on this. I speak about it in our vault. I speak about it everywhere. And then we've got within our program, it's like nitty gritty stuff, right? So that you can create an algorithm where ultimately the least amount of people will fall through your cracks. Okay, we're always minimizing. There's like the people you can help and then there's the people you can't help, right? And we're always trying to minimize that segment so that we're constantly helping as many people as possible and we're getting those 1% gains. So the better you get your systems, the more thorough, the more comprehensive, the more variables you can start to rule out for people, the more you can start to sort things out like inside and outside variables, making sure that the onus of responsibility is on the patient to be accountable for their decisions, helping them understand their own psychology so they can make better decisions, right? Not just tell them, don't eat junk food, right? But figure out why they're eating the things. Like, what's the habit there? What's the emotional gain? What's going on? How can they create systems for themselves where it's less tempting, right? They can create a new environment where healthier behaviors emerge, which then becomes a new internal environment where healthier states emerge because symptoms are emergent, right? We have complex systems within our body. When things start interfering, there's this resonance happening, right? And sometimes the resonance is good, sometimes it's not good, and we get these symptoms. That's what's happening. Symptoms are emergent states, right? They're emergent properties from a complex system. So you can help somebody cultivate a different internal system where their symptoms are less likely to emerge, right? Where they don't generate illness. That's the idea. We're not just band-aiding symptoms, right? But in order to do that, you've got to have your clinical clarity dialed in. You just do, right? There's no way around that. So if you want to be able to expand this and help more and more people in a more comprehensive way, you've got to build systems. The nature of that is a lot of it relies on patient education, which again, fractal systems, right? Why say the same thing 10 times in a row to 10 different people that they're all going to forget half of what you said anyway, if not more, when you could just record it once and then reference them back to that video where they can watch it over and over if they need to, so that they don't forget, they don't misunderstand, right? I don't know about you, but I've had plenty of times in clinic where I tell a patient, oh, here's the stretch for your sciatica. Try this. I'll show it to you. You do it with me. Okay, do that 3 times a week. I'll see you in a week, whatever. They come back for their next visit. I say, have you been doing that stretch? They go, yeah, it's not really working, but I've been doing it. Okay, show me what you're doing. And it's nothing like what you showed them, right? This isn't their fault. They're not bad people. This is just the nature of the human mind. Memory is fallible, right? You show them something, they change it, they do all kinds of crazy things, and they're like, that stretch you showed me kind of actually, I think I hurt myself. Well, what were you doing, right? I didn't show you that. Whereas, if you have a video, they can watch it, rewatch it, right? You can say, hey, show me what you've been doing, and then they show you, and then you say, oh, you need to watch that video again because there's a point in there that you'll notice, right? You're doing something a little different. You're hurting yourself, right? It's like this all comes from wanting to do a better job helping people, and then you develop systems and systems and systems on top of that. It doesn't happen overnight. Right? But what I do is I create content that's responsive to what people actually need, and then I record it so that there's no doubt about what was said. And then I can just say it once, right? Just like I'm doing right now. So that's one way to start shoring things up, is to get your clinical clarity set up and then start to build fractal systems so that your people can come into an environment where they're supported and they don't have to be perfect and remember everything. Right? That also frees you up to be going deeper into your studies, deeper into your medicine, deeper into those cases. Like, you can help all these people, but there's some you can't help. Well, guess what? If you want to help those people, it takes time and focus to be able to dive into that information and do more deep research, which you don't have that time if you're busy repeating yourself, saying the same stuff over and over and over again. Right? I can do a lot of deep work because I don't have a schedule anymore. I've freed myself up, right? So now I have this space to go. And this is amazing, right? I'm very grateful for this. I want you to have this too. Some of our members, our summit members, annual members, they're doing the same thing. They're building these systems, and all of a sudden now they're freed up to do deeper research on that 3% of cases that are just rugged, tough cases. Now they have the mental bandwidth and the time to dive into that stuff, to keep expanding that, right? So there's one piece, okay? The next one, and I think this is probably one of the most important heuristics on this topic. And a heuristic is like a rule of thumb, basically, just kind of like a general rule, something you can think about. when you have a clinic, when you have a practice, you don't want to burn out. And it's good to have job satisfaction, right? And one of the places we get job satisfaction from is to be able to help people get changes in their life. When a patient comes back and they say, "You changed my life. I'm finally sleeping again." Or "I wake up and I don't feel like a zombie. I get out of bed and I'm actually excited about the day. I have energy to do the things I want to do, and I'm more present for my loved ones." I've had multiple times I've had patients come back and say, "My husband has his wife back. My daughter has her mother back." Right? I've had people say that multiple times. You're changing their life. That feeds back and we get this happiness like, hey, it's worthwhile, right? There's some significance to my career. My efforts are helping people. It's satisfying. This is one of the ways to stay out of burnout, right? Is to be able to make a big impact for people. So what I'll say is that the downside to that is when we have tough cases and we don't make a big impact, it kind of like the pendulum swings the other way, right? We go, oh my goodness, I'm worthless. I can't help anybody. I'm useless. And the higher volatility we have, right? Like if we let the wins really bring us up, then the lows and the losses will bring us down, and actually even more down, right? Because there's a thing called loss aversion, and our minds, especially our subconscious, it over amplifies negativity. It's just a survival thing, right? It's safety, right? It's to be able to kind of like feel losses more. So actually, if you get a good case and you get a lot of clinical success, you'll get like +5 happiness clinical mojo points, right? But then you get another case that's hard and not responding, and that's like -50 or 500 clinical mojo points. Yeah, it's really interesting how this kind of works. So we need to be able to temper that. The first step is to be aware of it and go, oh, that's just my psychology, right? It's the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? The person with the problem that's not responding, that gets the grease of more mental attention, right? Which sometimes means more emotional bandwidth too. You know, it's like, oh, I can't leave my work at the office. I'm at home up late at night, like worrying and ruminating about this case. That's what happens, right? We're rarely ever up late, can't sleep because we're thinking about what great of a job we did, right? It just doesn't have the same impact. So when you're looking at this, one of my mentors in school, in acupuncture school, said, don't get too worked up about your failures. And I was like, okay. And he said, but also don't get too worked up about your successes either. And I was like, oh, I see. This is very Taoist, right? Try to keep even no matter what. Then the losses can't bring you down. And he didn't say it this way, but he's trying to temper loss aversion. He's trying to have the same conversation we're having, right? I would offer that there's actually a better way to approach this, right? And that is, take your losses. Don't take your losses to your heart, right? Take your I'm going to call them failures, right? When things don't go that well for clinic, take those to your head, right? Failures go to your head, which means you get your mental software going, go, okay, I need to update my clinical algorithm. There's somebody falling through a crack. What's going on here? Use the stuff you're learning in the program. Use inside-outside variables. Use more education. Use different ways to speak so that people understand you because you're communicating in a way they understand, right? You have to get the message across. Of course, there might be some other things you got to look at, like your filtering and your systems design, like upstream. This might be a fractal systems problem, right? There's a lot of things like that. Like, oh, you know, I'm doing fertility and I just couldn't get her pregnant and she was 60 years old. And it's like, well, you shouldn't have taken that case, right? I'm using something like that's wildly obvious, but there's a lot of more nuanced versions of that, right? Like maybe you've got a mold patient who's having crazy migraines and they feel like they're in hell, right? And they know they've got mold in their house and they won't move. They won't leave the house. They can't leave the house, whatever it is. You need to crush the expectations down to basically like, we're going to try to bail out your boat and try to alleviate some of the symptoms, but just know you're being poisoned every single day, right? This is kind of like trying to get a 60-year-old woman pregnant with herbs or something. I mean, I guess it could happen, but like trying to get somebody that's living in a moldy, toxic environment to feel their best self and to have their life back, that's a big ask, right? You put yourself in that situation. So you have to start looking at some of these larger contextual forces and go, okay, what did I bite off here, right? If I bit off too much, no wonder I'm having trouble chewing it. Yeah. So sometimes it's a fractal systems problem, and you need to be able to sort that out, right? Sometimes it's a clinical clarity problem where your algorithm's underdeveloped. There's somebody kind of falling through the cracks, and it's like, oh, I see. They're not really person A. They're not really person B. I need to have a person C type solution for this kind of scenario. It's new to me, and you adapt and you evolve your algorithm and you try to help that person. And then guess what? You've done that mental work, and now you can help the next person like that too, which is really, really cool. You start to set up systems. Now you don't have to break your brain every single time, right? So take your losses to your head, work it out. Take your wins to your heart, right? Let your wins boost your morale. When people come in and they say, oh, you've changed my life. My husband has his wife back. My daughter has her mother back, right? I'm a brand new person, that kind of thing. Let that fill you from your heart and give you the morale and the internal sense of I don't know how to put it, it's just fullness. You just feel full, you feel alive, you feel lit up, right? Let that feeling percolate in there, because guess what's gonna happen at the same time, unless you only have one patient at a time, right? But at the same time, you're getting wins from one person, the other one's not responding. So we can balance, right? We can get that mojo in the heart, like, wow, I feel really connected to my work, and that will help fuel the head to go, all right, we need to crack this open though. We got to troubleshoot this, right? What's going on here? Does the person have secondary gains? Are they having adaptive challenges? Is there something technically I need to beef up with my algorithm? Do I need to do more research and find out different herb formulas or different exercises or whatever it is? Is there something environmental going on? Is it a fractal systems issue where I never should have taken this case on in the first place? And I now know that, right? Those kinds of things. That's how we do it, right? What we don't want to do is just get paralyzed and overwhelmed. And a lot of my work is to start to articulate and provide all the things I said, right? Like looking at fractal systems, looking at clinical clarity, looking at personal cultivation, and having none of these be vague, amorphous departments of personal and professional life. Instead, everything's mapped out and articulated, so you can just basically go down a checklist. Now we're not stuck, right? Take things step by step for yourself. All right, I hope that helps. Get to work.